June 19, 1944, Task Force 58. Advanced roughly 200 miles west of the Mariana Islands, USS Enterprise, Lexington, Bunker Hill, Yorktown, and 11 other carriers launched waves of F6F Hellcat fighters toward an approaching opposing fleet. Vice Admiral Mark Mitcher commanded the carrier task force from his flagship, Lexington. 15 carriers carrying more than 900 aircraft prepared to confront an opposing force determined to halt the American advance across the Pacific. What the opposing aviators discovered that morning would forever change their understanding of modern aerial warfare. Lieutenant Warrant Officer Sakio Komatsu adjusted his flight suit in the ready room aboard the carrier Taiho at 7:30 hours. The morning briefing emphasized a full-scale strike against reported carrier formations detected east of Guam. Intelligence indicated multiple large task groups operating southwest of Saipan. Komatsu was assigned to escort the second strike wave, intended to deliver a decisive blow against the advancing fleet. His aircraft carried an external fuel tank extending its range to over 1,000 nautical miles, transforming the agile fighter into a long-range escort platform. The tactics guiding this mission were rooted in successful operations from the early years of the Pacific conflict. Coordinated carrier-based strikes had once achieved devastating results through precision and superior training. Early commanders developed tactics designed to maximize maneuverability and endurance advantages against opposing forces. These doctrines relied on exploiting agility and range to outmaneuver adversaries, allowing skilled pilots to dominate aerial engagements through superior positioning and energy management, even when outnumbered. Task Force 58 represented the most powerful carrier deployment of the war to that point. The 15 carriers included 6 Essex-class vessels, each displacing over 27,000 tons, and equipped with reinforced flight decks built to handle heavier aircraft. This construction philosophy differed fundamentally from earlier designs focused solely on aircraft capacity. American engineers prioritized durability and damage control, accepting slightly reduced speed in exchange for greater survivability. The F6F Hellcat entered service in late 1943. As a direct result of lessons learned during earlier air battles. Grumman engineers designed it specifically to counter previous threats, using data gathered from captured aircraft and pilot reports. The Hellcat weighed approximately 12,000 pounds fully loaded and was powered by a 2,000 horsepower Pratt & Whitney double Wasp engine, capable of reaching 380 miles per hour. Its design featured armor plating around critical components and self-sealing fuel tanks to prevent catastrophic damage. 6 50 caliber Browning machine guns with high ammunition capacity provided formidable defensive and offensive power, exceeding that of most adversary fighters at the time. The opposing formation, launching from several carriers, including Taiho, Shokaku, and Zuikaku, consisted of around 128 aircraft approaching Task Force 58 from the west at an altitude of 24,000 feet. The pilots initially observed no interceptors, suggesting that tactical surprise had been achieved. However, many aviators in the formation were newly trained, with fewer than 100 total flight hours. Accelerated training programs, compressed from 3 years to just 6 months due to heavy attrition earlier in the war, emphasized navigation and formation flying, rather than advanced combat maneuvering. Carrier landing practice averaged only a handful of successful landings before deployment. Lieutenant Junior Grade Takeshi Yamamoto was one of the few remaining veterans, with more than 600 flight hours accumulated since 1941. His experience spanned missions across multiple theaters, where his air wing had once held a clear advantage in skill and coordination. But by 1943, new challenges emerged. Opposing pilots developed tactics that neutralized earlier strengths. Defensive formations reduced the impact of close-range turning battles, while energy-based maneuvers exploited weaknesses in endurance and protection. Ensign Hiroshi Tanaka flew as Yamamoto's wingman, a young pilot who had graduated from an accelerated training course just 10 weeks earlier. Together, they joined a mission that would soon reveal how dramatically the balance of power in the skies had shifted. His total flight time amounts to 75 hours, with only theoretical knowledge of aerial combat tactics. The fuel shortage forced elimination of advanced combat training, while ammunition scarcity limited gunnery practice to static ground targets. Most new pilots never fired their weapons at moving aerial targets before entering combat. The contrast between veterans and replacements creates severe tactical limitations within Japanese formations. Experienced pilots must simultaneously engage enemy fighters while protecting inexperienced wingmen who lack situational awareness. This burden reduces overall formation effectiveness, as veterans cannot fully exploit their skills while shepherding novices through their first combat experiences. American radar operators aboard USS Yorktown detect the incoming Japanese formation at 150 miles distance, providing 20 minutes advance warning before visual contact. Fighter director officers vector combat air patrol fighters towards specific intercept coordinates, using precise radar plotting. This technological advantage transforms aerial defense from reactive scrambling to coordinated interception with altitude and positional advantages. The fighter director system represents revolutionary command and control capability developed through 2 years of combat experience. Each carrier maintains a combat information center, where trained officers track all airborne contacts using radar displays. Radio communications link directors with airborne fighters, providing real-time tactical guidance throughout engagements. This centralized control maximizes defensive efficiency by concentrating fighters at optimal intercept points. Commander David McCampbell leads VF-15's 1st Division from USS Essex, climbing toward the incoming raid at military power. His 12 Hellcats maintain tight formation while following radar vectors toward their assigned targets. Each pilot averages over 300 hours flight time with extensive gunnery and tactical training completed stateside. The American training program expanded dramatically throughout 1943, producing 10,000 new naval aviators annually. Operational training units provided 500 hours total flight time, including 150 hours in combat aircraft types. Advanced fighter training emphasized deflection shooting, energy management, and coordinated team tactics against dissimilar aircraft simulating enemy capabilities. The Hellcat's design philosophy prioritizes pilot survival through comprehensive protection systems. Armor plate surrounds the cockpit, including seatback, headrest, and floor panels totaling over 200 pounds. The bulletproof windscreen consists of 1.5 inches laminated glass, capable of stopping 7.7mm rounds at point-blank range. Self-sealing fuel tanks use multiple rubber layers that expand when punctured, preventing fuel leaks and fires. The robust airframe withstands significant battle damage while maintaining structural integrity. Test flights demonstrated the Hellcat's ability to absorb multiple 20mm cannon hits while remaining controllable. This durability provides psychological confidence, as pilots know their aircraft can survive encounters that would destroy enemy fighters. The Japanese formation encounters the first Hellcats at 0915 hours approximately 90 miles west of Guam. The American fighters attack from above and behind, using their altitude advantage for high-speed diving passes. Ensign Tanaka breaks left, attempting to force an overshoot, but the Hellcat follows his turn with surprising agility. The American fighter's superior power allows sustained turning at speeds where the Zero's controls become heavy and unresponsive. Multiple .050 caliber rounds strike Tanaka's aircraft, severing control cables and puncturing fuel tanks that immediately ignite. The Zer's lack of armor protection proves catastrophic, as armor-piercing incendiary rounds penetrate the thin aluminum structure. Tanaka's aircraft explodes when flames reach the wing fuel tanks, demonstrating the Zero's vulnerability to concentrated firepower. This shocking destruction contradicts everything Japanese pilots believed about their aircraft's combat superiority. The psychological impact spreads through the formation, as pilots witness their fighters destroyed with apparent ease. Commander McCampbell's division executes coordinated slashing attacks against the Japanese formation, using superior speed and firepower. The Hellcats dive from 28,000 feet, reaching 450 miles per hour in their attack runs before zooming back to altitude. This energy-based tactical approach negates the Zero's maneuverability advantage while exploiting its inferior high-speed handling characteristics. The Japanese pilots attempt traditional turning engagements, but cannot force the Americans into sustained dogfights. Each Hellcat pilot maintains strict energy discipline, refusing to engage in low-speed turning battles where Zeros excel. The Americans demonstrate remarkable teamwork, with wingmen protecting leaders during attack runs while maintaining mutual support throughout the engagement. This coordination reflects extensive multi-aircraft tactical training, emphasizing section and division tactics over individual combat. The Hellcat's robust radio equipment enables clear communications despite electromagnetic interference from dozens of simultaneous transmissions. Japanese pilots struggle with inferior radio systems that produce static and feedback, preventing effective tactical coordination. Many Zero pilots disable their radios entirely due to constant interference, relying on hand signals and pre-briefed formations. This communication breakdown compounds tactical disadvantages as Japanese formations fragment under coordinated American attacks. The first engagement ends with severe Japanese losses as 12 Zeros fall to Hellcat guns within 8 minutes. American pilots observe multiple characteristics that contradict intelligence estimates of enemy capabilities. The Japanese fighters demonstrate poor gunnery, with most bursts passing harmlessly behind intended targets. Their evasive maneuvers follow predictable patterns, suggesting inadequate combat training and limited tactical repertoire. Several Japanese pilots abandon advantageous positions through apparent confusion or inexperience, failing to exploit brief opportunities when Hellcats present vulnerable aspects. Lieutenant Alexander Vatsu from VF-16 aboard Lexington intercepts a second Japanese formation attempting to penetrate the fighter screen. His section of 4 Hellcats engages 12 enemy aircraft with devastating effectiveness, shooting down 6 planes in 8 minutes. Vatsu expends only 360 rounds of his 2,400-round ammunition load, demonstrating the effectiveness of American gunnery training. The concentrated firepower of 650 caliber guns proves overwhelming against the Zero's fragile structure. Short bursts produce immediate catastrophic damage, with wings separating, engines exploding, and fuel tanks igniting from incendiary rounds. The technological disparity becomes increasingly apparent as the battle develops throughout the morning. Hellcats absorb multiple hits from Japanese 7.7mm machine guns without significant damage, while their own weapons destroy Zeros with minimal ammunition expenditure. American pilots report enemy aircraft disintegrating under concentrated fire, often exploding after just 2 or 3 seconds of accurate shooting. The Zer's 20mm cannons pose a theoretical threat, but low muzzle velocity and limited ammunition reduce their practical effectiveness. Most Japanese pilots exhaust their cannon ammunition quickly through poor fire discipline, leaving only rifle-caliber machine guns for subsequent engagements. Radar-directed fighter control enables efficient vector management as American fighters intercept multiple incoming waves. The fighter direction officers maintain complete tactical awareness through radar tracking and pilot reports, positioning fresh fighters at optimal intercept points. This systematic defense prevents Japanese formations from coordinating mass attacks against the carrier force. Individual Japanese groups arrive piecemeal, encountering concentrated Hellcat formations positioned for maximum tactical advantage. The raiders suffer progressive attrition before reaching effective attack range of American vessels. Vice Admiral Jizaburo Ozawa launches his second wave at 0856 hours, comprising 128 aircraft from all available carriers. The strike includes 48 Zero fighters, 53 Judy dive bombers, and 27 Jill torpedo bombers tasked with overwhelming American defenses through sheer numbers. However, the inexperienced pilots struggle with basic navigation as formations fragment during the long approach flight. Several groups become lost entirely, wandering aimlessly while consuming precious fuel reserves before finding their targets. Lieutenant Russell Reiser from VF-31 aboard USS Cat intercepts the second wave's leading elements 60 miles from the task force. His division of Hellcats attacks from upsun, achieving complete tactical surprise against the enemy formation. The opposing pilots fail to maintain proper lookout procedures, allowing the American fighters to approach undetected until they opened fire. Within minutes, several aircraft spiraled toward the ocean, trailing smoke and flames from severe structural damage. The remaining planes attempted to continue their attack, but encountered successive formations of Hellcats positioned at different altitudes. Each interception followed a consistent pattern: diving attacks from higher altitude, followed by rapid climbs to regain position. The Hellcats maintained a clear energy advantage throughout these engagements, controlling the fight while preventing effective counterattacks. This aerial dominance reflected not only superior aircraft design, but also comprehensive pilot training focused on energy management and coordinated tactics. The opposing pilots, who had trained for close-range maneuvering combat, found themselves unable to respond effectively at higher speeds, where their aircraft lost agility. The second wave's attack on Task Force 58 achieved minimal success as surviving aircraft reached the defensive screen in small, scattered groups. Anti-aircraft fire from escorting destroyers and cruisers created dense defensive barrages that further broke up the formation. The few attackers that reached the carriers faced concentrated defensive fire from multiple ships, firing proximity-fused shells. Only one torpedo bomber managed to release its weapon, which USS Indiana successfully avoided through precise maneuvering. Commander McCampbell, leading VF-15's second strike group, encountered another enemy formation around 1,100 hours. His 12 Hellcats engaged more than 40 opposing aircraft in a 20-minute battle. McCampbell personally downed 7 planes, while his wingman, Lieutenant Roy Rushing, accounted for 4 additional victories. The engagement highlighted the cumulative advantage of American pilot training and tactics, as experienced aviators capitalized on every mistake made by their opponents. The enemy formation soon broke apart, with individual aircraft maneuvering defensively rather than pressing the attack. Lieutenant Commander Kenji Suzuki, piloting a damaged aircraft back toward his fleet, observed the devastating losses sustained by the strike groups. His fighter was riddled with bullet holes, one control cable severed, and the engine barely functioning. The magnitude of these losses exceeded any previous carrier engagement, including Midway, where at least some aircraft had successfully reached their targets. On this day, the results were minimal, while dozens of planes and highly trained airmen were lost. The scale of the setback soon became clear, as intelligence officers received fragmented reports of heavy casualties across all 3 attack waves. Surviving pilots described relentless fighter opposition, with American aircraft appearing at multiple altitudes and directions. The tightly coordinated defense prevented effective concentration of attacking forces while inflicting overwhelming attrition. Intercepted communications indicated that American losses were minimal despite engaging numerically superior forces. Air staff aboard the fleet carriers tallied the missing aircraft as hours passed. The first wave had launched 69 planes, but only 27 returned, many heavily damaged. The second wave suffered even more severely, with barely 1/3 of its 128 aircraft making it back. These losses represented not only aircraft, but also the depletion of experienced aviators whose skills required years to cultivate. The implications reached beyond the immediate tactical defeat, signaling the beginning of the end for one side's naval air superiority. Returning pilots displayed visible signs of psychological strain from the intense combat they had faced, describing overwhelming pressure and helplessness against opponents whose aircraft seemed unshakably resilient and tactically coordinated. Their 7.7mm machine guns appear completely ineffective, while American 52nds tear their aircraft apart with devastating efficiency. The myth of the Zer's invincibility shatters completely, as pilots witness squadron mates destroyed without opportunity for effective resistance. Veteran pilots like Yamamoto struggle to comprehend the reversal of aerial superiority they enjoyed throughout the war's early years. The tactical methods developed through successful campaigns in China, Southeast Asia, and the Pacific no longer function against this new American fighter. Years of combat experience become meaningless when the enemy refuses engagement on terms where Japanese pilots excel. The psychological foundation of Japanese naval aviation, built on technical superiority and pilot skill, crumbles in a single morning's combat. Morale aboard Japanese carriers plummets as maintenance crews count empty parking spots where aircraft should have returned. The flight decks designed to operate 75 aircraft each now hold scattered remnants of once powerful air group hoops. Mechanics and armorers who prepared aircraft for the morning strikes stand idle with no machines to service or weapons to load. The human dimension of defeat becomes apparent as friends and squad mates fail to return from what promised to be a decisive victory. Admiral Ozawa contemplates the implications of continuing operations with drastically reduced air groups. The fourth wave of 82 aircraft prepared for launch, but reconnaissance reports indicate the American carriers maintain full combat capability despite 3 mass attacks. The sacrifice of additional pilots and aircraft seems pointless against an enemy that demonstrates overwhelming tactical and technical superiority. Yet withdrawal abandons the Saipan garrison, and acknowledges defeat in what Japanese planners considered the decisive battle for Pacific supremacy. The communication breakdown between senior commanders and flying personnel becomes critical as accurate battle assessment proves impossible. Surviving pilots provide conflicting reports about enemy strength and capabilities, while staff officers struggle to compile coherent tactical analysis. The traditional Japanese emphasis on spiritual determination over material factors prevents honest evaluation of American advantages. Many commanders refuse to acknowledge that enemy fighters could so completely dominate their naval aviators, regardless of numerical superiority. The F6F Hellcat's dominance stems from comprehensive design advantages, addressing every aspect of aerial combat. The Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp engine produces 2,000 horsepower, nearly double the Zer's 1,130 horsepower Sakai 21 engine. This power advantage translates into superior climb rate, acceleration, and high-altitude performance, where thin air reduces the Zero's already marginal power-to-weight ratio. The Hellcat climbs at 3,500 feet per minute compared to the Zero's 2,600 feet per minute, enabling American pilots to maintain energy advantage throughout engagements. The Hellcat's armament of 6.5 caliber Browning machine guns, with an ample loadout of 400 rounds per gun, delivers devastating firepower. With excellent ballistic characteristics, each gun fires 850 rounds per minute with a muzzle velocity of 2,900 feet pers, maintaining flat trajectory and hitting power at combat ranges. The total firepower exceeds 100 rounds per second of armor-piercing incendiary ammunition capable of penetrating engine blocks and igniting fuel tanks. The ammunition supply provides 30 seconds of sustained fire, allowing multiple engagement opportunities without ammunition conservation concerns. The Zer's armament combines two 20mm Type 99 cannons with two 7.7mm Type 97 machine guns, presenting theoretical firepower advantages through explosive cannon shells. However, the cannon's low muzzle velocity of 2,460 feet per second creates significant trajectory drop, requiring different aiming points from machine guns. Limited ammunition of 60 rounds per cannon forces pilots to conserve fire, reducing practical rate of fire during extended engagements. The 7.7mm machine guns lack stopping power against armored American fighters, while their 700 rounds per gun cannot compensate for inadequate penetration capability. American radar technology provides decisive tactical advantages through early warning and fighter direction capabilities. The SK Air Search Radar detects aircraft at 100 meters range, while SM HITEF Finding Radar determines altitude within 500 feet. Accuracy. This information feeds into combat information centers, where trained officers plot all contacts on vertical display boards. Fighter director officers vector defending fighters using VHF radio equipment, providing clear communications despite atmospheric interference. The integrated system transforms aerial defense from individual pilot initiative to coordinated tactical operations, maximizing defensive efficiency. Japanese carriers lack effective radar systems, with most vessels relying on visual observation for air defense coordination. The Type 21 Air Search Radar, installed on some carriers, provides only 60 miles detection range, with poor reliability and frequent false contacts. Without height-finding capability or integrated fighter direction, Japanese combat air patrols operate independently using pre-war tactical doctrine. The absence of centralized control prevents efficient fighter allocation against multiple incoming raids, while limiting tactical flexibility during engagements. By late 1944, a new Japanese Navy pilot graduated with just 40 hours flying time, while his American opponent had at least 525 hours flying time. American pilots average extensive gunnery training with camera guns, recording accuracy during simulated combat. Formation tactics received equal emphasis, with pilots trained extensively in energy management, mutual support, and coordinated section maneuvers during advanced training. Operational units provided realistic preparation under experienced instructors who rotated from frontline squadrons. In contrast, many replacement pilots from the opposing side averaged only around 100 total flight hours and received limited combat preparation before deployment. Fuel shortages restricted training to classroom instruction and short flights using older aircraft. As a result, Most trainees had little or no live-fire experience before entering combat. Formation flying emphasized precision over tactical adaptability, while essential elements, such as aerobatics, instrument navigation, and night operations were reduced or eliminated. This gap in pilot quality further amplified the disparity in aircraft performance once engagements began. Despite mounting evidence of heavy losses in earlier strikes, the fourth and final attack wave launched with determination. Admiral Ozawa committed his remaining 82 aircraft in a final attempt to inflict damage on the American carrier fleet before retreating westward. However, these aircraft encountered even stronger opposition as American carriers refueled, rearmed, and launched new waves of combat air patrols. The resulting engagements became increasingly one-sided, with Hellcats positioned at multiple altitudes, systematically intercepting each incoming group. By 14:30 hours, American search planes located the opposing fleet roughly 275 miles west-northwest of Task Force 58. Admiral Mitcher immediately ordered a large-scale counterstrike of 216 aircraft, despite the long distance requiring careful fuel management. The force included 85 Hellcat fighters, demonstrating their ability to conduct offensive missions beyond fleet defense. While the opposing carriers struggled to maintain minimal defensive patrols, American task groups projected overwhelming offensive strength. The battle dynamic completely reversed from defensive combat in the morning to a full-scale offensive by afternoon. When the American strike reached its target, the defending carriers were virtually unprotected, with only about 35 operational fighters remaining out of more than 400 that had been available that morning. Hellcat fighters quickly cleared the skies, allowing dive bombers and torpedo planes to attack without significant resistance. One carrier was sunk after multiple torpedo hits, while others sustained severe damage from precision bombing runs. Anti-aircraft defenses proved largely ineffective against coordinated, well-timed attacks delivered by experienced aviators. The return journey after sunset created immense navigation challenges. Many pilots faced fuel shortages and limited visibility as they searched for their carriers in the dark. In a remarkable decision, Admiral Mitcher ordered all ships to illuminate their decks and use searchlights, despite potential risks from enemy submarines, to guide the returning crews home. This bold move prioritized the safety of airmen over ship concealment, illustrating confidence in the task force's tactical advantage. Although approximately 80 aircraft were lost due to fuel exhaustion and nighttime accidents, rescue operations recovered the majority of personnel, thanks to destroyers deployed for search and recovery. By dawn, carriers were already preparing new search missions to locate the retreating enemy fleet. Admiral Ozawa's withdrawal marked the conclusion of the battle. Out of more than 430 aircraft available at the start of the engagement, only about 35 remained operational. The fleet that had entered battle seeking a decisive victory instead suffered overwhelming losses, achieving little beyond confirming the extent of American air superiority. The outcome represented not just a tactical defeat, but a strategic turning point. With limited industrial capacity and pilot reserves, rebuilding carrier airgroups on the opposing side became nearly impossible before the next phase of the war. The Battle of the Philippine Sea underscored how technological advancement, disciplined tactics, and comprehensive pilot training could completely overturn established doctrines. Early in the conflict, the opposing air force had built its reputation on highly maneuverable aircraft and experienced aviators who dominated the skies during the first years of war. However, the introduction of the Hellcat reversed that dynamic, entirely an aircraft purpose-built to counter previous advantages and restore balance to the air war. American designers accepted weight penalties for armor and self-sealing tanks, creating an aircraft that survived damage that destroyed Zeros instantly. The powerful engine provided performance margins, allowing pilots to dictate engagement terms while avoiding situations where Zeros excelled. The massive firepower of 650 caliber guns overwhelmed Japanese aircraft structures, designed for minimum weight rather than battle damage resistance. The American training system's expansion demonstrates industrial-age warfare's triumph over craftsman tradition. While Japan struggled to train hundreds of replacement pilots using abbreviated programs, America trained thousands using systematic curriculum developed through operational analysis. The assembly line approach to pilot production achieved consistent quality through standardized instruction and extensive flying hours. Each American pilot represented an interchangeable component in the naval aviation system, rather than an irreplaceable individual whose loss crippled unit effectiveness. The radar-directed fighter control system exemplifies technological force multiplication beyond individual aircraft capabilities. The ability to position fighters optimally before visual contact negates Japanese tactical surprise while maximizing defensive efficiency. This systematic approach to aerial defense transforms carrier task forces from vulnerable targets to nearly impregnable fortresses against conventional air attack. The integration of sensors, communications, and command functions create synergistic capabilities exceeding the sum of individual components. Japanese naval doctrine's failure to adapt to changing circumstances proves fatal when pre-war assumptions encounter wartime reality. The emphasis on offensive operations using carrier aviation, achieving decisive victory through single engagements, becomes irrelevant against an enemy that refuses such terms. American forces accept gradual attrition through sustained operations, rather than seeking climactic battles for theater supremacy. This operational patience, combined with industrial superiority, guarantees eventual victory, regardless of individual engagement outcomes. The human cost extends beyond aircraft and pilots to institutional knowledge accumulated through years of training and combat experience. Japan's pre-war naval aviators represented an elite cadre whose skills required extensive development through rigorous selection and training. Their loss cannot be replaced through abbreviated wartime programs that produce pilots with minimal competence rather than excellence. The qualitative decline becomes self-reinforcing, as inexperienced pilots suffer disproportionate losses, further degrading overall force effectiveness. Task Force 58 continues operations off Saipan despite Japanese attempts to disrupt the invasion through carrier aviation. The morning of June 20th brings renewed searches for the retreating Japanese fleet, while maintaining defensive patrols against potential land-based attacks. American pilots who survived yesterday's combat describe it as just like an old-time turkey shoot, giving the battle its enduring nickname. The term captures both the one-sided nature of aerial combat and the mechanical efficiency of destroying Japanese aircraft. The final tally reveals the catastrophic scale of Japanese defeat, with 445 aircraft destroyed, including 395 carrier planes and approximately 50 land-based aircraft. American losses total 123 aircraft, with 80 falling to operational accidents rather than enemy action. Only 43 American planes fall to Japanese fighters and anti-aircraft fire during 2 days of intense aerial combat. The 10-to-1 exchange ratio exceeds any previous carrier battle, including the decisive American victory at Midway. More significantly, Japan loses over 400 pilots, including instructors recalled from training units representing the last reservoir of experienced naval aviators. Admiral Ozawa's report to Combined Fleet Headquarters acknowledges the effective destruction of Japanese carrier aviation as an offensive force. The surviving carriers possess ships and aircraft, but lack trained pilots capable of conducting effective operations against American forces. The mobile fleet that sortied expecting to achieve decisive victory returns having demonstrated only American aerial supremacy. The strategic implications become apparent as American forces continue advancing toward Japan without meaningful aerial opposition from the Imperial Navy. The technological revolution in naval warfare, demonstrated at Philippine Sea, influences post-war aviation development worldwide. The integration of radar communications and fighter control establishes patterns followed by every major navy seeking carrier aviation capability. The emphasis on pilot survivability through aircraft protection and systematic training becomes standard practice, replacing pre-war acceptance of attrition. The Hellcat itself continues serving through the Korean War, adapted for ground attack missions that exploit its robust construction and heavy armament. American industrial superiority ultimately proves decisive through quantity and quality advantages that overwhelm Japanese forces, regardless of tactical innovation or individual courage. The ability to produce thousands of aircraft monthly, while training pilots to operate them effectively, creates insurmountable numerical superiority. Each American loss can be replaced multiple times, while Japanese losses become permanent degradation of combat capability. The production statistics reveal the hopelessness of Japan's position. America produces 96,000 aircraft in 1944, while Japan manages only 28,000 despite total national mobilization. The Hellcat achieves the highest kill ratio of any American fighter, with 5,223 confirmed victories against 270 losses in aerial combat. This 19-to-1 ratio exceeds every other aircraft type while accounting for 75% of all Navy aerial victories despite entering service halfway through the war. The F6F validates the design philosophy, prioritizing pilot survival and firepower over pure performance metrics. Veterans consistently praise the Hellcat's forgiving flight characteristics and ability to absorb battle damage, while maintaining combat effectiveness. Japanese naval aviation never recovers from the Marianas disaster, relegated to desperate kamikaze attacks that sacrifice pilots and aircraft for minimal strategic impact. The institutional knowledge accumulated through decades of development disappears in a single day's combat against superior American forces. The Zero fighter that symbolized Japanese aerial supremacy becomes synonymous with obsolescence and vulnerability against modern American fighters. The psychological impact extends beyond military defeat to national recognition that spiritual determination cannot overcome material inferiority against industrial democracy's arsenal. The Battle of the Philippine Sea represents the culmination of American naval aviation development from Pearl Harbor's disaster through methodical construction of overwhelming superiority. The carrier task forces that Japan attacked in 1941, hoping to eliminate American Pacific presence, return multiplied tenfold with superior aircraft, pilots, and tactical doctrine. The transformation from desperate defense to offensive supremacy occurs through systematic application of industrial resources, technological innovation, and operational analysis. The Hellcat fighter embodies this evolution, from reactive response to Japanese initiative toward purposeful dominance through superior design and employment. Admiral Mitch's after-action report emphasizes the totality of American victory, while acknowledging the fortunate circumstances that concentrated Japanese attacks against prepared defenses. The combination of radar warning, fighter direction, and superior aircraft creates perfect conditions for defensive success against conventional air attacks. However, he warns that future enemies might develop asymmetric responses, requiring continued innovation rather than reliance on proven formulas. This prescient observation anticipates the kamikaze phenomenon that emerges from Japan's desperate attempts to offset conventional inferiority. The individual pilot experiences reveal the human dimension beyond statistical abstractions of victory and defeat. American pilots describe the surreal experience of shooting down multiple enemy aircraft with minimal effort, while feeling sympathy for opponents flying obsolete aircraft with inadequate training. Japanese survivors recount the horror of watching squadron mates destroyed without opportunity for effective resistance against an enemy that seems invulnerable. These personal narratives capture warfare's essential tragedy, where technological superiority translates into human suffering, regardless of individual courage or determination. The Marianas Turkey Shoot enters aviation history as demonstration of American aerial supremacy achieved through systematic superiority in training, technology, and tactical doctrine. The battle proves that modern warfare rewards industrial capability and scientific advancement over warrior tradition and spiritual determination. Japan's attempt to achieve decisive victory through conventional carrier aviation ends in catastrophic defeat that eliminates their naval aviation as an effective force. The Imperial Navy that dominated the Pacific in 1942 becomes incapable of meaningful offensive operations by June 1944. The strategic consequences extend beyond immediate military defeat to fundamental reassessment of warfare's nature in the industrial age. Japan's military leadership must confront the reality that their nation lacks resources to compete with American production capability regardless of tactical innovation. The decision to continue fighting despite mathematical certainty of defeat reflects cultural inability to accept surrender rather than rational strategic calculation. The kamikaze phenomenon emerges from this cognitive dissonance between accepting defeat's inevitability while refusing its implications. The sinking of carriers Shokaku and Taiho by American submarines on June 19 compounds the aerial defeat with irreplaceable platform losses. Shokaku, veteran of Pearl Harbor and every major carrier battle except Midway, succumbs to torpedoes from USS Cavalier while refueling aircraft. Taiho, Japan's newest and most advanced carrier with an armored flight deck, sinks from a single torpedo hit that causes catastrophic vapor explosions. These losses eliminate not just ships, but the institutional experience of their crews, who cannot be replaced before war's end. The technological and training advantages demonstrated during the Marianas Turkey Shoot establish patterns that continue throughout the Pacific War's remainder. American forces advance inexorably toward Japan, while Japanese forces attempt increasingly desperate defensive measures without meaningful success. The carrier task forces that seemed vulnerable to Japanese attack in 1941 become unstoppable instruments of American power projection by 1944. The transformation from defensive response to offensive supremacy occurs through methodical application of industrial democracy's advantages against military autocracy's limitations. The battle's aftermath sees American carriers continuing operations off Saipan, while Japanese survivors retreat to anchorages beyond American aircraft range. The invasion proceeds without meaningful interference from Japanese naval aviation that ceased to exist as an effective force. The airfields on Saipan, Tinian, and Guam soon host B-29 bombers that bring strategic bombing to Japan's home islands. The carrier battle intended to prevent this outcome instead confirms American ability to project power wherever their national strategy requires, regardless of Japanese opposition. Veterans of the Philippine Sea battle remember the morning of June 19, 1944, as the day American naval aviation achieved unquestioned supremacy over its Japanese opponents. The months of preparation, training, and technological development culminate in a few hours of aerial combat that eliminate Japanese carrier aviation's offensive capability. The Hellcat fighter proves itself as the weapon that transforms American carriers from vulnerable targets into dominant instruments of naval power. The pilots who fly these aircraft demonstrate that systematic training can produce competent aviators in quantity, overwhelming elite opponents through numerical and qualitative superiority. The lessons learned from the Marianas Turkey Shoot influenced naval aviation development for decades. As nations recognize the importance of integrating technology, training, and tactical doctrine, the emphasis on pilot survivability through aircraft protection becomes standard design philosophy, while radar-directed fighter control establishes patterns for fleet air defense. The American victory demonstrates that industrial production capacity combined with technological innovation creates military superiority that traditional military virtues cannot overcome. The battle stands as testament to democracy's ability to mobilize resources effectively against authoritarian aggression when national survival demands total commitment. The human cost measured in Japanese lives lost during futile attacks against superior American forces represents warfare's essential tragedy, where courage cannot overcome material disadvantage. Young Japanese pilots who dreamed of glory defending their homeland instead die in obsolete aircraft, overwhelmed by an enemy they cannot effectively engage. Their sacrifice achieves nothing beyond demonstrating American superiority while depleting Japan's remaining reservoir of trained aviators. The survivor's guilt experienced by pilots who return from missions where squadron mates perish becomes a defining characteristic of Japanese naval aviation's final period. The F6F Hellcat's success validates the design philosophy that prioritizes pilot survival and consistent performance over exceptional capability, requiring exceptional skill. Average American pilots achieve extraordinary results, flying aircraft that forgive mistakes while delivering devastating firepower against fragile opponents. The Zero that demands perfection from its pilots while offering no margin for error becomes a liability when pilots lack extensive training and combat experience. The contrast between design philosophies reflects deeper cultural differences about valuing human life versus achieving military objectives, regardless of cost. The Battle of the Philippine Sea marks the end of carrier aviation as a balanced competition between opposing forces with complementary advantages. American technological and training superiority creates conditions where combat becomes execution rather than contest with outcomes determined before engagement begins. The Japanese pilots who launch from their carriers on June 19 fly into predetermined destruction, lacking any realistic capability to achieve their objectives against prepared American defenses. The turkey shoot metaphor captures this essential imbalance, where one side holds overwhelming advantages that guarantee victory regardless of enemy actions. The strategic implications of the Marianas Turkey Shoot extend throughout the Pacific War's remainder, as Japan cannot rebuild carrier aviation capability before eventual defeat. The pilots lost during one morning's combat represent years of training investment that cannot be replaced through abbreviated programs producing marginally competent replacements. The institutional knowledge accumulated through decades disappears when experienced pilots die, without opportunity to transfer their skills to the next generation. The qualitative collapse becomes irreversible, as inexperienced pilots suffer disproportionate losses in subsequent operations, further degrading overall effectiveness. The morning of June 19, 1944 witnesses the destruction of Japanese naval aviation as an effective military force through systematic demonstration of American superiority. The F6F Hellcat fighter serves as the principal instrument of this victory, combining protective design, powerful armament, and superior performance in an aircraft that average pilots can employ effectively. The integration of radar warning, fighter direction, and coordinated tactics creates defensive efficiency that overwhelms Japanese attacks, regardless of determination or tactical innovation. The battle proves that industrial democracy's arsenal can produce military superiority through methodical application of technological and training advantages against traditional military opponents who rely on spiritual factors to overcome material disadvantages. The Marianas Turkey Shoot enters history as the decisive moment when American naval aviation achieved supremacy that continues through the Pacific War's conclusion. The Japanese carriers that once projected power throughout the Pacific become floating targets for American aircraft they cannot effectively oppose. The transformation from Pearl Harbor's vulnerability to Philippine Sea's dominance demonstrates democracy's capacity for military regeneration when facing existential threats. The battle stands as proof that freedom's arsenal, properly mobilized and directed, can defeat aggression regardless of initial advantages held by authoritarian opponents who mistake temporary superiority for permanent dominance.